John, welcome to the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
We'll start to see my room here light up when the sun rises. So we're at dawn here in Los Angeles, and you are where?
I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, so we're 3 hours ahead of you.
Yeah, you got a head start on the day, so congratulations on that. Um, can you always the best way to start if you can briefly introduce yourself, and I always put an asterisk on this for men because men usually start off with, well, this is who I am, my title, and what I do. And that's not actually the question. The question is stuff like, where are you from originally? We found out where you are now in Cincy. Anything you feel comfortable talking about your family and background and things like that, and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah, cool. My name's John Cavanaugh. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, and in Cincinnati, it's a very interesting area where people talk about what high school you went to, and very close knit. Private school tends to be the norm since there are tons of Catholic churches on every block. So I went to a Catholic school, small Catholic school, class of like 36 people. My dad was the principal there, and my mom helped build, there was no art program, there was no music program. She helped build that as we went to school. So I grew up with great parents who, um, really put time and effort in the things they believed in, and they stayed in their community and built it up, which is something I've learned from them. And I swam in high school. Went to college at the University of Cincinnati, where I double majored biology and Spanish. And from there, I accidentally started a business that I worked on for 10 years by building a website with some friends that blew up very quickly. And did a software as a service. Now I run a nonprofit, and I'm going to school at the same time for a PhD in aerospace engineering, also at the University of Cincinnati.
Well, great. You answered all my questions. Thanks for coming. And
Yeah, no
you,
problem.
you remind me of Jay Leno when he talked to Robin Williams. He said all he had to do was say, "Hey, Robin," and the rest was history.
That's awesome.
Um, so when you were a kid, because I like to find out stuff like this, when you were a kid, were you the organizer of everybody? Were you the lemonade stand? Were you into sports, music, all of the above? What was going on?
Um, I read math books for fun as a child.
That's weird.
Yeah. I really love school. I was in law school they call them a gunner, but someone who always raised their hands. I just love knowledge. My parents had my teachers give like extra homework packets for me. So I would go home, do all my homework, then do more homework. And I was really curious and interested in um,
Did you know
you know,
your parents were doing that?
yeah. Because the teacher after class would give me an extra packet, and I'd get stickers in return, which was enough. When you're 8 years old, a
Of
sticker
course.
from a teacher is great. So yeah, I loved reading. The max in our library, school library, was like 7 books a week, so I just maxed out 7 books a week.
Wow.
I just really enjoyed learning, and then um, yeah, was kind of in a group where I could be with like the really popular kids or the misfit toys, and I chose to hang out with the misfit toys. They tend to be more interesting and fun, and I didn't care about playing kickball on the field. We're just
Got
hanging out. Yeah,
it.
we're just hanging out and reading and stuff.
Wow, 7 books?
Yeah, like chapter books. I like the Boxcar Children, the Magic Tree House, if you remember those books, but they're
Sure.
what I read as a kid a lot of times. And then a lot of Roald Dahl, Charlie and Chocolate Factory and stuff. And then, eventually Harry Potter. And
Well, what's a good theme there? It's all imagination, curiosity, getting the brain going and stuff like that, which is awesome. I actually had someone on the Leaders of Care series just recently whose dad was a principal also, and his mom was a teacher at the
there
same
we go.
as
There
well.
we
So very, very similar. And there's something to be said for that discipline, that open for imagination, that everything like that. Were you ever into music at all?
Yeah, yeah. I grew up playing piano
Hmm.
starting at age 8. And then I became too cool for piano at 16 and
Oh.
got a guitar, you know. And then the big brain move is realizing that piano is the coolest instrument, and I returned to that. I still play, on weekends and stuff for various, organizations and
That's
churches.
awesome. No, it is super cool. It's tough to carry with you, but it is cool in that respect.
I just dropped like $400 on a moving my piano like a couple months ago. So
And it's got to be carefully moved too.
it does, and then it needs to be tuned. But yeah, there's keyboards and stuff. But I like a real piano. I also produce music for fun. I've done over 200 tracks. Yeah, mixing, mastering, orchestration, composition, those types of
Wow.
things.
I'll have to introduce you to my youngest son who writes beats like hip hop and stuff like that.
Cool.
And gets some two artists and stuff. So yeah, it is pretty cool. I know you talked about when you went to college, and you got Spanish literature and biology.
Yeah.
Natural combination anybody would choose, obviously. What were you thinking about at that
Yeah.
time?
Yeah, so I was really focused. I took 4 years in high school, so I was pretty good. I was spent a month and a half in Peru, um,
Machu
which
Picchu?
yeah, I visited Machu Picchu and I lived in a little city outside of, well, not even a city, a pueblo outside of it, called Andohalias, and it's a very small area. I taught English, lived on a farm, and then it was a high school related project because we had a high school teacher from Peru and she had us come and give back and such. And it was
Brilliant.
connected to, I was a Jesuit school. I went to a Jesuit school and there was a Jesuit priest at that parish. So that was the connection. We raised money by having a dance and selling. They had an orphanage that sold like jewelry and stuff. So we raised enough money to help build a library there, which was pretty cool. So I was immersed into the language and the culture, and I also wanted to be a doctor when I first started. So
Mm.
it pays a lot, and there's a Guatemalan community here. If you're a doctor that doesn't need a translator, you're highly sought after to begin with. So I viewed it as like sort of a lucrative move on something that I already had a decent skill set at.
Entonces te hablas español, ¿no?
The-
Sí,
Mhm.
mejor que yo, probablemente. Um,
Depending on
um, no, the reason I love asking people about that and what happened when they were kids and whatnot is we get for example, I get so many men especially that tell me what happened when they were a kid that is the foundation for their confidence and their theme and their real passion of what they do later and stuff like that, the impact it has. And if a coach puts him out, like someone told me a coach put me out when I was 11 onto the field in the most important part of the game, and that is their foundation for their confidence because that coach believed in them so much then and it's stuck. And so experiences like that you had in Peru is spectacular, and I would think everybody should do something like that. It really opens up your eyes. I'm sure it did for you.
Yeah, my parents were delighted and dismayed that I came back with an empty suitcase. I literally gave everything away. It was not the plan. It was just like people needed things and I built relationships with them and I didn't need it as much. So, yeah, totally came back empty-handed.
I'm sure
And
you weren't giving away Jordan running shoes and Versace purses, though.
no, I don't, I couldn't have done that. But yeah, the
Um,
clothes off my back, really, like literally.
well, good for you, though. And that way you didn't get charged for an overweighted luggage, too.
Yeah, exactly.
We talk about experiences. We're really big on what we do about the difference between years of experience, it's years of doing stuff versus experiences that
Mhm.
people pick up. Can you share? I mean, you've had some interesting ones, and maybe they're inflection points. Can you share a little bit about ones that made an impact on you? And for example, at University of Cincy lab research, I like the fact where you said breaking up with your girlfriend, and you were studying a cool, cute cockroach. I mean, all these things that people don't usually end up happening. Were any of those or all of those inflection points for what was next?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, yeah, just diving a little back into the fundamentals of growing up. Um, I think the most important thing when I look back at everything is that my parents were together, and stayed together, because that is even statistically more important than having coming from wealth. So it's the best thing. I
Yeah.
had so much stability, and then I realized growing up, some friends got their parents got divorced and how they acted out and such. Like, definitely the most key thing possible is that they were together. I never saw them argue, or like they argued, but I never saw them act mean to each other, which didn't realize was rare, right? Like, my house was very loving. So I think that is the single most important thing, and it's something that I didn't have control over, right? Like, I didn't choose my parents. Um, so I think that was the most important part. I would say the next inflection point, and I didn't even talk about sports much, but um, was I'm very tall and lanky, and I had no control of my body, so I was not good at basketball. Like, I was okay. I can make the A team, but I'd make it to stay on the bench. When I played on the B team, I scored all the points for like, I was a 6'2" point guard, that because everybody else was terrible, and I could just, like, do layups and stuff. So I was either be an all-star on the B team or be like nobody on the A team. So I decided to go
It's
into
never a nobody because the worst player in any professional league, for example, is a star. And the janitor at Nassau was recognized as being a big part of their whole mission and all that, you know?
I love it. I love it. I did make a winning shot, a shot clock last shot. And when you were mentioning the experiences people had about the sports, I was like, yeah, that was like a moment where they like all picked me up and stuff. It was fun. So that was on the A team, but it's
That's
very,
big, by the way. You know, that was they say trauma sticks
yeah.
inside you. Call it positive trauma, but it really does stick.
Yeah, no, that was fun. But no, I decided to go into swimming, and swimming is so profound because even more than running, it is so meditative, because all you're doing is staring at the black line on the bottom. Like, your head position is down. You can't look up, otherwise you sink. So you are literally just staring at a line for 2 hours a day. And during that, it's excruciating. You're having trouble breathing, right? You're tired, you're exhausted. You do weight training on top of everything.
Yeah.
So your mind is like constant, it's a constant war of, do I give up or not, or go harder, right? And so you can either get really good at it, or you can drop out and say, this isn't for me. You could also take most athletes, put them in a pool, and they're going to struggle, whereas swimming gives you enough endurance in other sports where you're pretty much okay. So I think
And it
that was
doesn't bang up your knees and back either.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think it's really fundamental for the discipline that I had going into college. So I did it during high school. My school has won 33 state championships, and I think 20 of them were in a row.
Well,
So really well known for swimming and diving. So that was really fundamental. Then going into college, I chose my college because it was the only one I could get into without being in debt. And I figured that was really important to me, even as an 18-year-old.
sure.
It turns out that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, because it's allowed me to be flexible, and starting my own business without being in debt uh, was very easy. I've never been in debt in my life, even credit card debt. So, like, I didn't realize how much stress that puts on the body, and a lot of my peers. So that was the next one. And then going into college, I really fell in love with research, like, as you're mentioning. So, my sophomore year, I heard this is a good story. My sophomore year, I heard about this crazy professor. He was known throughout the biology department as just being insane. And the reason why is he was 32, got tenure track, was tenured at the University of Cincinnati at 32, which is like unheard of. Usually you got to wait until your 40s or something. And he was setting up a mosquito lab. And mosquito labs are really hard to set up because you have to teach them to drink pig's blood from like a sack. And it takes a lot of generations. So a lot of times your mosquitoes die. So what this guy did, legend, right? He put his arm in the tent so that they would feed off of him. And he did this for several weeks because they needed to learn how to be a part of pig's blood, and how to take the pig's blood. And I was like, this guy's crazy enough that I think he's the perfect person to work for.
All right.
And he was an all-star. And so he conditioned me to look at research in a way that was totally unacademic and very real. And I got published as an undergrad working in his lab. First year I worked under a PhD student, but the second year I worked directly under him, which was really an honor. Like that's really unheard of. So, and at the end, he never throws out compliments ever. He just makes you work hard and makes you make sure you do good work. At the end, he said I was a pretty good scientist, and that is
That's
like the
huge, right?
compliment. Yeah, that's like, like the ultimate compliment I've ever gotten from any professor. Because and being a pretty good scientist in his book is like, top tier. Just
There's
even
a
get a
lot, there's a lot to be said for authenticity because then when you get that, you know it's real.
yes, exactly. There's kind of a joke that's like, and it's stereotypical, but it's like your mom always says she loves you, and it doesn't mean as much as like when your dad, says it like once a year or something like that, where he really means it, it just means more, it just hits differently. Or that, I'm proud of you kind of thing. So yeah, it's similar to
There's
that.
a Finnish comedian. His name is Ismo. He's hilarious, and
Okay.
he says stuff like, in Sweden they have a Swedish massage, but we can't say we have a Finnish massage. That doesn't work, type of thing. And he said in Sweden, I mean in Finland, we say we love you once a year in the holidays and whatnot. In America, they love burgers, they love this, they love that, they love everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, how's your day? Amazing. You're like, really? You were amazed after your day today. Yeah. I
So
agree.
I got to ask you though, how did your girlfriend feel when you broke up?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. She was my high school girlfriend starting at 14. We broke up around 19. And this was ultimately from a conversation with my professor. And I was working on my business. I had two majors. I was also a resident advisor. And so I came in to the lab at 4 in the morning after working. He's an early bird, farm boy, the professor. He's early bird, so he comes over. He sees me. I have bags under my eyes. I'm in the cockroach lab. The mosquito lab also had cockroaches and all sorts of stuff. I specialized in the Hawaiian cockroach, which
Of
are they
course.
look like beetles. They're cool. Like they're not ugly the way that most cockroaches. No, they are cute. And
You have a
he
weird
came
definition of cute, dude, but go ahead.
in. Hey, when you spend all day with ugly insects, ones tend to look better. Yeah, so his name's Dr. Benoit. He came into me, he came into the insectary and he was like, "Hey man," and he was a postdoc at Yale. He's like, "You know, there are really smart, brilliant people that I talked to at Yale and undergrads, and they were really good at a bunch of things, but they weren't great at a few things." He's like, I see you going down that path. I see you're all over the place. You got so many things that you care about, but you need to really decide to to prioritize, one or two things that can make you stand out. He's like, I've fired more people at Yale, more students at Yale than I have at the University of Cincinnati. Um, and I don't think he fired anybody, maybe one or two at University of Cincinnati. And but he's like, I like the work ethic of Cincinnati, but you know, when you graduate here, think about how you're going to be perceived, and think about what actually you're going to learn. Like, yeah, you might be decent at a bunch of things, but like, what really sets you apart from everything else?
hmm
You need to figure that out. So I did some reflecting. One thing about my personality is I'm not stubborn, so I do listen to advice. And I really sat deep with that. And I realized I wasn't sleeping much. I wasn't eating very healthy. Um, I was doing so many things that I was passionate about, but something needed to change. And so after reflection, I really looked at, okay, I don't care that much about school. My girlfriend had, in college, our relationship changed where um, she became more dependent on me and it was a little overbearing. Funny story. I joined a frat to get out of connecting with her as much or having an excuse to hang out with guys, to like go do my own thing a bit. Like, yeah, you can't come hang out with the guys. So like, and I realized that was like a terrible way to handle it. Like, I didn't really fit in with the frat life and stuff, and I wasn't partying, I was working. So I'm like, what am I doing? Like this is silly. I don't feel the same way about her as I used to, and I'm just too afraid to break up and too comfortable. And I was like, "Ah, Josh is right, and he's a person that I wanted to be, right? I emulated like, wow, at 32, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He's doing incredible work, and he's a good professor. He's a good teacher. He's, a good, I looked up to him,
Mhm.
not quite as a father figure, but pretty close, like a mentor. And I was like, all right, I got to pull the trigger. So I broke up with her. I started negotiating at school. Like I couldn't do all this homework and run a business. So I negotiated at school, like, hey, can I get 100% of my grade on the final? Like, I'm not going to take any tests, quizzes, reading. And some teachers were like, because I would explain and I'd show them metrics. Like, hey, there are like 100,000 active users on this thing. This is what I've built. I'm going here. Here's my calendar. I'm going to be in Ohio State on Friday. I can't be at Cincinnati. So a lot of them, like, teachers are really cool and they're excited to help you succeed if you even at a big college like ours. So a lot of them were like, yeah. Or how about you take a midterm and a final and we'll call that, or you write a paper
Well,
in
I
addition.
think there's starting to interrupt. Hold on, really
Yeah.
good, actually, and but
No,
I think
you're
there's a
doing
lot
great.
to learn there. Call it communication, call it authenticity.
Yeah.
When you're bringing something real to the table, and they see it's real, then that's a teaching moment in itself. That
Mhm.
that you can work things out with people, but they don't know if you don't ask them, type of thing. And you were doing. It's not like you were, you know, hanging out, somewhere, and not, you were doing real stuff. So, and it kind of leads me a little bit to, I was gonna ask how you did multitask so many things, and how you did end up, going for your PhD, as well, and that was in aerospace engineering, which, with Spanish and literature and biology and aerospace. And so I wanted to chat a little bit about that, because our business is all about talent and leadership and impact, and it's
Yeah.
kind of focused on that. And you can see you're developing, and you're honing in now with people's advice as to where you're going. Um, I'd love you to I'd love you to segue a little bit into your decision to say F off about selling student data, and
Okay.
and why, and then how that led you to then, had the Plunk business, if you will, and then the Plunk Foundation. Talk about that.
Yeah, so the first business that I've been alluding to this whole time, it was essentially a website to connect, basically solve my own problem. So I was a pre-med student. I wanted to connect to med school students, to figure out like, hey, what would you have done differently for the MCAT exam? What is this looking like? And my biggest fear was, putting myself $500,000 in debt to go through med school only to not like what I'm doing for a living. And there are so many doctors out there, because I've had them, where it's clearly that they weren't cut out for this. And what else do you do to get out of that debt? It's not like you're going to take a, $15 an hour job on top of that, after all the training and discipline and hard work.
Right.
So it basically exploded to 10,000 users within a month and grew really, really fast. We eventually became a software as a service product for universities for retention rates. And we built ways for students to connect to people on campus and even hiring managers outside of campus. And a big part of this was that the next phase that we were going to build was a sentiment analysis model that would help with students who are struggling or not fitting in or anxious or exam deadlines, not just a lot of pressure in college, and the suicide rates reflect that in college campuses. So what we wanted to do was build nudges to get people to schedule appointments or get some instant relief if they needed so, based on understanding their message, sentiment, how frequently they were on, what they were talking about, in a very secure way. that we would just automate messages, or even ping them to the resident advisor or other staff that they could check in,
Hmm.
just as preventative measures. We were running a Series A funding for 50 to $100 million. And every investor was like, hey, you're already making money. You got a good business model. But this data piece, we can push ads to people who feel sad and upset and lonely and depressed because they buy more. So that felt really wrong. People already struggling, and using them as easy targets. One thing I didn't realize is that if you're involved in tech, there's a data play. Sometimes that's the entire business model. Other times, like Adobe has software as a service, they also have the data play. And for Adobe, a third of their revenue comes from, data. Also, Procter and Gamble, Kroger, they're in Cincinnati, huge companies. Kroger does groceries, and Procter and Gamble does,
Everything.
Dow Jones business, basically.
Mhm.
Oh, they consider themselves on their annual report a data company, both of them. So the data is the play for all of these, even seemingly boring product-based businesses. It's really the data behind those businesses. I was realizing, okay, this is how it is. I don't want to participate in this from this purview where I'm dealing with mental health. And then, so I felt very strongly, and so did my co-founder. Luckily, we had the same moral fibers. We felt very strongly that this wasn't right to do. They then turned around and said, "Okay, well, it looks like you're unfit to be the CEO of this company. We would love to have uh, you know, put our own people in and just buy you out, take the intellectual property, and go from there." That was about, I don't know, $13.8 million for the two of us split in two. But the funny thing was, it wasn't too much of a conversation. It was just like, still feels wrong. Like, yeah, I could retire, but could I sleep at night? And you know, learning from my background, maybe it's really clear like why I wouldn't take that money, how I grew up, how my parents raised me. And so it's not
100%.
it wasn't even something like I sat and prayed over. It was just like that's just doesn't feel right. And
And how
then
relevant it is to what's happening now with algorithms and mental health and everything as well.
totally, totally, yeah. So it's just become more to light. And essentially, like the history of the internet, not to get too boring, but like Google, all these companies had to make up their own business model. And so they, modeled it off of TV, but then they also realized, oh, there's all this other data that can make things better than TV advertisements. And we can actually pinpoint things. And so it became a natural progression. I don't mean to say that tech companies are inherently evil, but like over time, this is just how the
Yeah.
unregulated industry evolved and what became profitable. And small businesses that they advertise on these things, that's how they make their living. So like it is an infrastructure that people are using, and it is benefiting a lot of people, but there's also a dark side to it as well.
And it seems like that, correct me if I'm wrong, that drove you to, that directed you to all the amazing stuff you're doing at the foundation, at Plunk Foundation right now.
Exactly. So Plunk Foundation is just an abstraction of this. We realized, hey, how do we build ethical technology, and why do we build this? So we wanted to build technology, but also create awareness and education for not just understanding data, but also just understanding how you can stay safe online. We realize that a lot of this data world that we live in makes it really accessible. Like you can look up somebody's name, you can on the dark web, you can pretty much pay a couple bucks, get all the relevant information about them that you want. And this has been really devastating in domestic violence situations, human trafficking situations,
Right.
global situations where if you're a certain race, ethnicity, whatever, in a certain area, that can be illegal. That can be a death sentence. LGBTQ community in a very non-modernized place. You know, uh, those types of things. So I was starting to really have my eyes open to, wow, this is the norm and the status quo, but there's these hidden things that we can actually help people who don't know about it protect themselves, and we can also help nonprofits who, serve our most vulnerable better strengthen the way that they deal and interact with their donors and with the people that they serve. And we can also help tech companies who still want to do really great things and still have amazing services. We can help them see the area where they're putting people at risk, but they don't mean to. And so all three of these things, in my opinion, are the most important things in today's challenges where we have a world where algorithms are creating shock
Right.
and disgust because people it sells better than sex, rage does. And so now we have very, very diverted people who won't even be friends based on who you voted for, where calls to violence are overt or laughing at somebody who recently got assassinated. And like all of these things are very abnormal and very tribalistic. And that can usurp democracy. So people don't believe that the earth is round, as an example. Things about getting rid of the polio vaccine, various things that were like fundamental truths, have, fractioned based on data and catering, and following that person to extremes over time. So
You know what
I,
it brings me back to, sorry to interrupt again, is it
yeah,
brings me
you're
back
good.
to your statement of the fact that your parents stayed together gave you that valued foundation of what was right, if you will, not to be too philosophical, and what was wrong to make the decision of we're not selling the student data, and we are going to try to make a difference to maybe help the tech companies do what maybe they originally were hoping that they would do, and instead of going for the letting the algorithm run wild on, and as a result negatively impacting people because of the algorithm going to rage and going to all the bad stuff instead of the good stuff.
Exactly. So we have 40 professors on our advisory board. We're serving 30 million people currently. And so people are looking in depth from a technological perspective, but also a sociological perspective, the communications perspective. We have people who are experts in, why people don't change their mind when they see data, and like what confirmation bias is. And how do we, reverse engineer ways where people have more balanced approach to the things they're inhibiting. A lot of people just don't even understand that if you go to youtube.com, that feed is different for every person based off what they're watching. So like when people are like, "Oh, you haven't heard of this? It's super viral. Everybody's been talking about this." It's like you're in your own echo chamber, buddy. Like nobody's talking. Like the narratives have been broken and fractioned in so many ways. And so we have a very intense amount of researchers and practitioners coming together to solve these problems and work with people. And the other thing is like we're not anti-big tech. Like there's a lot of infrastructure that's happening. But we want to help make it better and help them be aware of these things so that they can change. And we're seeing, and the organizations that know these things and haven't changed, the US FTC has been, finding a lot of them, and there's been a lot of regulation when they uncover these things but don't report it. So that side of the justice system is coming together too.
Yeah, I think it's huge, and I think it's the absolute right timing because um, of what it's doing to regular people, veterans, and health tra and on human trafficking, which I've been involved in, and all these things that are hurting people, and they don't have to. You can still make money and do well economically and help your community without having to go this route. So
Mhm.
it's always fascinating, and which is why I start with the family and the kids of how the theme continues in sometimes a looks like a non strategic way, but it actually does happen. How the foundation is set for the future. We say in LA that we should leave them wanting more so we can do a sequel. I think we're probably going to have to do a sequel on this because it's amazing what you're doing, and congrats because I think it's something that's really going to make a difference and is needed big time right now. So I'd love to talk more about it. I have one more question though on this part.
Yeah.
In 2021, a client told me, he said about the year 2020, the pandemic, he said it was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought, what a great line, because now even people feel like the COVID was yesterday and years ago at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, so with all that said, and AI going fast and furious, and the world's like jumping up and down in every direction, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Yeah. I'm really grateful for the support that I have. So I have family support. We still meet every Sunday for dinner. So that's awesome. My lab at the AI Bio Lab at the university is phenomenal. And I have a group of artists. We all come together every Thursday. The president of the Art Academy of Cincinnati and the former dean, and we bring in guests of characters. So I have like, they're called third spaces in between work and home. And I really find the value of third spaces, even the gym, working out, those types of things. So I'm thankful for the community. I'm thankful for my health. And then I'm really thankful that the more I've been working for myself, I'm really thankful that I have that freedom as I've seen a lot of my peers, you know, uh, deal with bad bosses, crazy hours about something they're not passionate about. I'm cool, crazy hours about something I like to do. So yeah, I'm just very grateful that I have that freedom and whimsy integrated into my life as well.
Sure. What are you most hopeful for?
Yeah, I'm actually really hopeful um, for, our country has a lot of division, but I'm really hopeful for how things, will evolve, specifically in the US. I think it's, I think it's a time where when I talk to most of my friends, they have a lot of fear or trepidation, but out of conflict, at least to most of my life, this conflict and this looming thing, I tend to be believing in humans to get to the right area, and I think it's a major point in of our country to really, we're still a young country, to redefine who we are. And carry forward in this storming phase that we're in. So I am hopeful, and I plan on getting involved in a lot of these local elections and local places as well.
That's what we need. We have a program called Nonflict. I'm on the board of a nonprofit that does a lot of that, and it's amazing. Well, I'm really grateful that I have a new friend. I'll tell you that,
Me too.
and I'm grateful and hopeful that you are a leader who cares and doing something about it. So, congrats and thanks on that, and kudos to your parents, and that crazy professor, the guy, and on all the people along the way. And thanks for sharing, and thanks for being on the Leaders Who Care series.
Yeah, it went fast. Oh my goodness. I feel like we could go.
But we do need a sequel, so we'll do that. Thanks, man.
Wonderful. Yep. Thank you.